It started like any normal Thursday night in Dallas. I was in the kitchen, reheating leftovers, half listening to the TV playing some old rerun. My husband, Evan, was upstairs in his home office, finishing a brief, or at least that's what he said. My daughter, Ava, was in her room working on a school project about planets. Everything felt painfully ordinary. Then I heard it. Evan's office door wasn't fully shut, and his voice carried down the hallway. At first, I thought he was on a work call. He had that smooth, confident tone he used in meetings. But then I heard a woman laugh, a high, flirty kind of laugh that didn't belong in my house. And then he said it. That fat woman disgusts me, Sierra. I can't even look at her anymore. For a second, I thought I misheard him. Maybe he said, that bad woman. Maybe he was talking about someone at work. But then Sierra's voice came through, giggling again. Don't worry, baby. You'll have me soon. Okay. The spoon I was holding slipped from my hand and hit the floor. My whole body went cold. He was talking about me. I stood there, staring at the kitchen tiles, listening to my husband, the man I'd supported through law school, the man I worked 2 jobs for, talk about me, like I was some burden he couldn't wait to throw away. He didn't even sound angry. That's what hurt the most. There was no emotion in his voice, just annoyance. Like I was a stain he couldn't scrub out. I pressed my hand over my mouth so he wouldn't hear me breathing. The house was quiet except for his voice and her laugh. I felt like I was underwater, like everything around me was moving in slow motion. I looked around that kitchen, the one I'd saved for years to remodel, the granite countertops I picked, the expensive stove I bought because he said it would make family dinners feel special. All of it suddenly looked like props in a fake life. After a few seconds, I couldn't stand there anymore. I went upstairs, careful not to make a sound, and peeked through the crack in his office door. He was sitting at his desk, shirt sleeves rolled up, phone in his hand, smiling. That same charming, fake smile he used in court. And that's when it hit me, he wasn't ashamed. He wasn't sorry. He didn't even think I could ever find out. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while he snored next to me, pretending to be the perfect husband. I kept hearing that sentence on repeat in my head. That fat woman disgusts me. By sunrise, something inside me changed. It wasn't anger yet. It was more like the numbness before a storm, the kind of calm that tells you there's no going back. The next morning, I made breakfast like nothing happened. Pancakes for Ava, black coffee for him. He kissed me on the cheek before heading to work, and I almost laughed. I watched him walk out the door thinking, you have no idea what's coming. Later that afternoon, I went into his office. His phone was on the desk, unlocked. He never worried about me checking, it was part of his arrogance. I opened his messages and found everything I needed to know. Trips with Sierra. Photos. Voice notes. Complaints about me like I was a defective appliance he couldn't return. There it was, in writing. Every cruel word he thought I'd never see. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, holding his phone, realizing that the marriage I thought I had was already gone. That night, I took Ava to get ice cream. She was talking about school, about her friend Emily who wanted to be an astronaut. And somewhere between her laughter and the sound of her spoon clinking against the cup, I made a silent promise. I was going to make sure she'd never grow up thinking this was what love looked like. When we got home, I walked past Evan's office without looking inside. I didn't need to. I already knew who he really was. Before going to bed, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. My eyes were puffy, my face pale, but I saw something there, something I hadn't seen in a long time. Resolve. I whispered to myself, "You think I disgust you? Fine. Watch me disappear." And I meant it. If you've ever had someone underestimate you, tell me in the comments how you proved them wrong. I read every single one. And if you like stories about betrayal, revenge, and women taking their power back, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Evan came home late that night. I could smell the cologne that wasn't his, something sweet and cheap. He didn't even notice that I'd taken down our wedding photo from the hallway. He just tossed his briefcase on the couch and said, "What's for dinner?" I looked him straight in the eyes and smiled. Leftovers. He had no idea that by tomorrow, I'd already be planning my exit. The next morning, The air in the house felt heavier than usual. I stood at the stove flipping pancakes, watching butter melt on the pan like it was the only thing I could control. Evan walked in wearing that same pressed shirt he always wore when he wanted to look important. He didn't say good morning. He didn't even look at me. He just grabbed his coffee, scrolled through his phone and sighed. "You forgot to buy oat milk again," he muttered. I wanted to laugh. The man who just spent last night whispering to his mistress was mad because his milk wasn't organic enough. I said nothing. Silence had become our language. He sat down at the table, eating like he was in a hotel restaurant. I set a plate in front of him out of habit, then immediately regretted it. Ava came bouncing in, hair messy, school backpack half open. "Daddy, can you take me to school today?" she asked. "Not today, sweetie. I've got a client meeting." He didn't even look up. It wasn't a meeting. I knew exactly who he was meeting. He finished his coffee, kissed Ava on the top of her head, then turned to me and said, "Try to clean up the kitchen before you go back to work. It looks messy." That was it. No goodbye. No thank you. Just an order. When the door shut behind him, I just stood there in the silence. The house was spotless, but somehow I felt filthy, like his words had left a stain no amount of scrubbing could remove. By noon, I was sitting in my car in the grocery store parking lot, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. My hair was dull, my face tired, my shirt stretched from too many washes. I used to care about how I looked. I used to dress for myself. Somewhere between late bills, night shifts, and Evan's criticisms, I'd stopped trying. A text buzzed on my phone. It was him. "Don't forget to pick up my suit from the cleaners." "No, please." "No, thank you." Just a command. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. That's when I realized something that hit harder than his betrayal. I had made myself small to keep the peace. I had shrunk piece by piece until I was nothing but a shadow that did everything and received nothing. That night, I decided to test something. When Evan came home, I didn't cook. I didn't greet him. I didn't say a word. I just sat on the couch with Ava, watching a movie. He walked in, dropped his keys on the counter and said, "No dinner?" "No," I said flatly. His head snapped up like I'd just insulted his ancestors. "You didn't make dinner?" "No," I repeated, eyes still on the TV. The silence stretched. Then he laughed, the kind of laugh that isn't funny. "Wow, you can't even keep up with one simple thing, can you?" Ava's eyes flicked between us. I didn't want her to see me cry, so I stood and took my plate to the sink. He followed me, still talking, his voice sharp. "You've really let yourself go, Danielle. You used to care. Now look at you. What happened to the woman I married?" I turned off the faucet and looked at him. Really looked at him. "She died," I said quietly. "You buried her with every insult and every night you didn't come home." He blinked like he didn't understand what I meant. "You're overreacting," he said. "You're just being emotional again." Odd and out. That sentence, the classic male shutdown, was gasoline on fire. I gripped the edge of the counter so hard my fingers ached. "You know what, Evan? Maybe I am emotional. Maybe that's what happens when you're treated like furniture for 10 years. Ava peeked from the hallway. I forced myself to breathe. "Go upstairs, honey," I said gently. She hesitated, then obeyed. Evan crossed his arms. "This marriage isn't working because you stopped trying." I laughed. "Stopped trying? I worked 2 jobs while you were in law school. I paid our mortgage when you couldn't. I raised our daughter practically alone while you networked. But sure, I'm the problem." He picked up his briefcase, muttering, "I don't have time for this." As he walked away, I said the thing that finally made him stop at the door. "You don't have to. Soon, neither will I." He turned, smirking. "You wouldn't survive a week without me." End quote. And that was the moment something inside me snapped back into place. Not broken, restored. I just didn't show it yet. He left again that night. Said it was a late client dinner. I didn't ask where. I already knew. After Ava went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and opened a new notebook. The first line I wrote was simple. Find proof. Protect Ava. Leave. I underlined the last word twice. It wasn't a plan yet, just a start. But for the first time in years, I wasn't sitting there hoping he'd change. I was quietly preparing for the day I'd stop being invisible. The next morning, he kissed me goodbye like everything was normal. He didn't notice that the wedding ring on my finger was gone. The day I decided to leave started like any other Evan barking orders, me pretending to listen. He was standing by the door, buttoning his shirt, ranting about how I'd forgotten to iron it. I didn't even bother defending myself anymore. I'd stopped playing that game. While he complained about wrinkles, I looked at the man I'd spent over a decade trying to please and realized how empty the effort had been. His face didn't look like the man I fell in love with. It looked like a stranger wearing his skin. When he finally left for work, the silence felt different. It wasn't heavy this time. It was clean, like the house had taken a deep breath after holding one in for years. I went upstairs, opened my closet, and pulled out the old duffel bag I used in college. I didn't cry. I just started packing. Clothes for me, clothes for Ava, important papers, her favorite stuffed rabbit. I moved quietly, methodically, like I'd rehearsed this 100 times in my head, which, honestly, I had. I didn't take everything, just what mattered. The rest, he could keep. Let him have the furniture, the fancy TV, the car he polished more than he ever touched me. Around noon, I went to pick up Ava from school early. Her teacher looked surprised. "Everything okay?" she asked. I smiled, tight but sincere. "We're just taking a little break," I said. Ava was confused, but she trusted me. She always did. On the drive out of Dallas, she sat in the back seat humming to herself, completely unaware that we were leaving behind everything she'd ever known. Halfway to Waco, she finally asked, "Mom, where are we going?" "To Grandma Clara's," I said. "Are we coming back?" I hesitated for half a second too long. "Not for a while." She looked out the window, quiet for a moment, then said softly, "That's okay. Grandma makes better pancakes anyway." I laughed through the lump in my throat. Kids have this way of softening even the hardest moments. By the time we pulled into my mother's driveway, the sun was setting. Her porch light was already on, like she'd been expecting us. She stepped out wearing her robe and slippers, holding a mug of tea. "Baby girl," she said, taking one look at my face. "What did that man do now?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She opened her arms, and I let myself collapse into them. For the first time in months, I felt safe. Clara tucked Ava into the guest room with a warm blanket and a story before coming back to the kitchen. She poured me a cup of tea, sat across from me, and waited. She'd always known when silence was better than questions. Eventually, I started talking. Not the version I told friends, not the polite, marriage is hard version. I told her everything, every insult, every night he didn't come home, every time he made me feel small. When I finished, she just nodded slowly and said, "You've been surviving, not living." I let out a shaky breath. "I don't even know where to start, Mom. He controls all the money. The accounts are in his name. The house, the car, everything." She smiled like she'd been waiting for that line. "You think that makes him powerful?" "No, sweetheart. It just means you've been too nice." She reached into a drawer and pulled out an old leather envelope, edges worn soft. Sometimes, the things we think will destroy us are the very things that set us free. I frowned. "What is that?" "Proof," she said. "But not about him. About you." That night, after Ava was asleep, she told me a story I wasn't ready for. When I was little, she used to say my father died before I was born. Turns out, that was only half true. He hadn't died. He'd been erased. His name was Michael Whitman. He came from one of the richest families in Dallas, the kind whose last name was printed on half the downtown buildings. My mother, Clara, had worked as a secretary for the Whitmans when she met him. He fell in love with her. His parents didn't approve. They paid her to leave town and never contact him again. She left because she was pregnant with me. She didn't want their money, just peace. But Jonathan sent her letters for years, trying to find us. He never stopped. She kept every one of them. I sat there, staring at the faded papers she spread across the table, old love letters, a few legal documents, even a hospital bill with his name on it. My whole life had just shifted sideways. Why didn't you ever tell me? I asked. She looked at me over the rim of her cup. Because you weren't ready to hear it, and maybe because I was ashamed. But now, you need to know. You're not just that man's wife, Danielle. You're your father's daughter. You have more power than you realize. Her words didn't sink in right away. I was too busy trying to process everything. The betrayal, the escape, the secret lineage. My whole world had changed twice in 24 hours. After she went to bed, I sat alone at the table, reading one of my father's letters. The handwriting was elegant, old-fashioned. If our child ever wonders who she is, tell her she comes from love, not from shame. The words hit me like a quiet thunderclap. For the first time, I didn't feel broken. I felt significant. Outside, the Texas night stretched endlessly. I thought about Evan asleep in our house, probably texting Sierra goodnight. I imagined his confidence, his arrogance, his certainty that I'd never leave. I smiled to myself. Let him sleep soundly, because by the time he woke up, the woman he used to control was gone for good. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the thin curtains, landing right on my face. It was strange waking up without the sound of Evan's alarm or his constant sighing as he got dressed. For once, the quiet wasn't heavy, it was peaceful. Ava was still asleep in the next room, her little stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. I went to the kitchen where my mom was already up, humming while she made breakfast. The smell of bacon and fresh coffee filled the air. It reminded me of being a kid again, back before life got complicated. She poured me a cup of coffee without asking and said, "You slept like a rock. Guess your body finally felt safe." I smiled a little, though my head was still spinning from what she told me last night. I don't even know what to do with it all, Mom. This whole thing about my father, about the Whitmans, it feels unreal. Clara sat across from me, steady and calm like always. It's real, honey. You were born into a mess of other people's pride, but that doesn't mean you have to stay small because of it. I took a sip of coffee, letting her words sit. Do you think he ever knew about me? She nodded slowly. He tried to find us. He sent letters for years. Then one day, they stopped coming. I think he died not long after. I didn't know whether to feel angry, sad, or grateful. Angry that I'd grown up thinking I didn't have a father. Sad that he never got to see me. Grateful that he hadn't turned into a man like Evan. Mom pulled another envelope from her purse, thicker than the ones from last night. I found this a few months ago when I was cleaning. It's from one of Jonathan's lawyers back then. I never opened it. I couldn't handle more drama at the time. She slid it across the table. My hands shook a little as I tore the flap. Inside was a notarized letter confirming my father's acknowledgement of me, dated before his death. Attached was something else, a trust document with my name written clearly, Danielle Whitman. I read it twice to be sure I wasn't imagining it. He left something for me. Clara nodded. He did, but his family kept it quiet. The Whitmans are old money, Danielle. They don't like surprises. I laughed bitterly. Well, surprise, here I am. Mom smiled faintly. You get that stubborn streak from me. After breakfast, Ava ran outside to play with the neighbor's dog. Mom and I sat on the porch, watching her. What are you going to do now? She asked. I honestly don't know, I said. Part of me wants to just forget it, live quietly, but another part of me wants to know who I really am, and maybe make them know it too. She looked at me, eyes soft but firm. Then do it, but this time, don't let anyone else tell you what you deserve. Oh. Her words hit deeper than I expected. I realized how many years I'd spent waiting for Evan to validate me, to see me. And here was my mom, reminding me I didn't need his approval or anyone's to exist. That afternoon, while Ava napped, I went through the papers again. The trust, the letter, the signature, it was all legitimate. Jonathan hadn't abandoned us. His family had erased us. I called an old friend from Dallas, Nina, who worked at a paralegal firm. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual. You still know that attorney who deals with estate disputes? Yeah, Naomi Fields, she said. Why? I need a consultation. Family inheritance issue. Danielle, she said quietly, are you okay? I will be, I said. And for the first time, I meant it. I hung up and leaned back in the chair. The afternoon heat pressed against the windows, the kind that makes everything slow down in Texas. I wasn't sure what I was walking into, but it felt like momentum, like I was finally steering my own story. Mom brought me a glass of iced tea and sat beside me. "You're thinking hard," she said. "About everything," I admitted. "About what comes next." "You don't have to decide today," she said. "Just remember this. You've already done the hardest part. You left." Her voice carried that mix of pride and sadness only mothers have. I squeezed her hand. "Thanks, Mom. For not saying I told you so." She chuckled. "Oh, believe me, I thought it, but you looked too tired to hear it." We both laughed softly, the kind that breaks tension. Later that evening, I walked outside alone. The Texas sky stretched wide and endless, painted orange and pink. I thought about how much life can change in 48 hours. Yesterday, I was a wife who didn't recognize herself. Today, I was a woman holding proof that she came from something more than pain. Inside, I could hear Ava's laughter mixing with my mom's voice. It was the sound of stability, something I hadn't felt in a long time. I looked down at the folder of documents in my hand. Each page felt heavier than paper should, as if it carried not just information but inheritance of truth, of courage, of worth. I didn't know what the Whitmans would say when they learned I existed. I didn't care. Because for the first time, I wasn't running from anything. I was walking toward myself. By the time the sun came up the next day, I already knew I wasn't going back to Dallas. I'd spent enough mornings pretending everything was fine. That part of my life was done. What I needed now was direction. Proof. A plan that didn't come from fear. I sat at the dining table while my mom made coffee. The stack of letters from my father was spread out in front of me. I'd read them twice already, but something about that last envelope, the official one, kept pulling my eyes back. The one with the notary stamp and my name typed neatly at the top. I opened it again. This time, I read every line slowly. It was a formal document from Michael Whitman's estate lawyer, confirming that my father had established a trust fund in my name before he died. I was listed as his legal heir, though apparently, his family had buried the record along with him. At the bottom was a note written in his own hand. "To my daughter, Danielle, may you never doubt your worth, even when others try to erase it." I traced the ink with my fingertip. It had faded with time, but it was real. My father's words, his handwriting. Proof that I came from something more than the version of myself Evan had reduced me to. Mom sat down across from me. "You gonna do something with all that?" she asked. "I think I have to," I said. "If it's real, this isn't just money. It's proof of who I am." She nodded like she'd been waiting for me to say it. "Then find someone who can help you. The right person." That afternoon, I called Naomi Fields, the attorney Nina had mentioned. Her assistant put me through within minutes. "This is Naomi," a confident voice answered. "Hi, my name's Danielle Porter. I was referred by Nina Jacobs. I have a question about a possible inheritance issue." She asked me to explain briefly. By the time I finished, she said, "I think you'd better come in. Bring whatever documents you have. Tomorrow morning work for you?" It did. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying what Evan might say if he found out. He'd probably laugh, call it one of my fantasies. He always thought I was naive, but he didn't know me anymore. Maybe he never did. The next morning, I dressed neatly but not fancy. Just jeans, a white blouse, and a small folder tucked under my arm. I wasn't walking in there to impress anyone. I was walking in to claim what was mine. Naomi's office was in downtown Waco. Modern but simple. Glass walls, dark wood furniture, not a single fake plant in sight. She was in her 40s, sharp eyes, the kind of woman who didn't waste time. "Let's see what you've got," she said, gesturing to the chair. I handed her the papers. She read in silence for several minutes, flipping through each page like someone reading the ending before deciding if the book was worth it. Finally, she looked up. "This is legitimate. The signatures match public records from the Whitman estate. And if I'm reading this right, you are entitled to a significant portion of their holdings." I blinked. "How significant are we talking?" She leaned back in her chair. 40% of Whitman Development Group. They're worth hundreds of millions. "Oh." I let out a short, stunned laugh. "You've got to be kidding me." "No. she said, smiling faintly. I don't joke about numbers that big. I stared at the papers again, the reality settling in like a slow-moving wave. All those years of being told I was nothing, turns out I was part of something enormous. Naomi crossed her arms. If you want to pursue this, we'll need to open a legal claim to verify your parentage officially. It'll be public. The Whitmans will fight it. He hesitated. I don't care about the money. I just want to know the truth. That's usually how these things start, she said. But truth has a way of changing lives sometimes in ways you can't predict. Her tone wasn't a warning. It was a promise. We talked for over an hour. Next steps, legal strategy, paperwork. Before I left, she said, You're not powerless, Danielle. You've been made to believe you are, but that ends here. Those words echoed in my head the whole drive home. When I got back, Mom was on the porch with Ava, helping her feed the neighbor's chickens. She looked up when she saw my face. So? What did she say? I couldn't stop the grin from spreading. She said I'm not crazy. Mom smirked. Took her that long to figure it out? We laughed. The kind of laugh that felt like oxygen after drowning. That evening, I called Evan's office just to test myself to see how it felt to hear his voice. His assistant said he was out for the evening. Of course he was. Probably with Sierra. I hung up and felt nothing. No ache, no jealousy, just clarity. Later that night, I sat by the window while Ava colored beside me. She was humming some song from school, completely content. I watched her little hands moving, her quiet concentration. That was my real inheritance, the reason I couldn't let life keep treating me like an afterthought. Mom came in and sat down, knitting in her lap. You've got that look, she said. What look? The look you used to get when you were about to change your whole life. I smiled. Maybe I am. The cicadas outside buzzed louder as the night deepened. I didn't know what the Whitmans would say, or what kind of storm I was walking into, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of storms. Because storms clear the air. They make things visible. And I was finally ready to be seen. The next morning, I was back in Naomi's office with a folder twice as thick. She greeted me with coffee and a small smile, the kind that says she already knows what comes next. Her assistant closed the door, and the world outside disappeared for a while. Naomi started by explaining the process slowly, clearly, like she'd done this 100 times before. The Whitman family has a long legal history. They've protected their name for generations. But if what you have is real, and it is, you have every right to claim your inheritance. I nodded, trying to keep my breathing steady. I'm not doing this for money. I know, she said, but you should understand that truth and money tend to travel together in families like that. She flipped through my documents again, tapping her pen against the table. You'll need an official DNA test, notarized, and a public filing to open the claim. Once that happens, the Whitmans will have to respond. Respond how? I asked. She looked up, one eyebrow slightly raised. Usually with lawyers, denial, and some version of, we've never heard of her. That earned a small laugh from me. Sounds like a fun family reunion. Naomi smiled. You'd be surprised how often I hear that. She leaned forward. Danielle, I've read between the lines here. You're coming out of a marriage that sounds toxic. Before we go any further, I want to make sure you're protected personally as well. You said your husband controls your finances? Completely, I admitted. Every account is in his name. I just handled the household bills. Then we need to file for separation and secure your assets immediately. I'll connect you with a financial advisor who specializes in cases like this. I blinked. That sounds expensive. Naomi's tone softened. You'll be fine. Once we verify the estate claim, the Whitman Trust can cover your legal costs retroactively. Consider this an investment in your freedom. The word freedom lingered in the air. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I'd felt it. We spent the next hour reviewing every piece of paperwork I had. Letters, birth certificates, old photos. She handled each page with the care of someone holding evidence, not just paper. When she finished, she said, I'll need you to stay in town for a few weeks while I start the filings. And Danielle, yeah? Don't contact your husband. Don't warn him. Not yet. I nodded. She didn't need to explain why. When I left her office, the Texas heat hit me like a wall. I stood there on the sidewalk for a minute, holding my folder, realizing that for the first time in years, I was part of something bigger than Evan's version of reality. Back at my mom's house, Ava was playing on the floor with a puzzle. She looked up and smiled. "Did you fix it, Mom?" I crouched beside her. "Not yet, but I'm working on it." That night, after Ava went to bed, I sat on the porch with Mom. The cicadas were singing, and the air smelled faintly of rain. She asked, "How did it go?" "She's amazing," I said. "Sharp, confident, no nonsense. She's handling everything." Mom nodded approvingly. "Good. You need people like that now. People who make you feel strong again." I thought about that for a while. Naomi wasn't just helping me legally, she'd given me something Evan had worked hard to take away: certainty. Later that week, Naomi called. "We've filed the claim," she said. "I also went ahead and prepared a preliminary divorce petition. You can decide when to serve it." I froze for a second, realizing that the word divorce didn't scare me anymore. It sounded clean. Naomi continued, "There's one more thing. You'll need to meet with a psychologist for a statement, someone who can attest to emotional abuse in your marriage. It strengthens your case and helps with custody." I sighed. "A psychologist?" "Her name is Dr. Elaine Morgan. She's very good. And don't worry, this isn't therapy if you don't want it to be. Just a conversation. But from what I've read between your words, you might actually like her." I agreed, though a part of me resisted. I didn't like talking about feelings. Evan used to make fun of me for being too emotional. But maybe that was exactly why I needed to. The appointment was set for Thursday. When the day came, I sat in my car outside Elaine's office for 5 full minutes before going in. The building was warm and quiet, filled with soft colors and the faint smell of lavender. She greeted me with a handshake, calm and steady. "Danielle," she said, "you've had a hard year." "That's an understatement," I said, forcing a smile. She motioned to the chair. "Tell me what brought you here." At first, I stuck to facts: my husband's affair, his insults, the inheritance discovery. But Elaine had that therapist way of asking questions that peel you open without you realizing it. "When did you stop recognizing yourself?" she asked gently. I stared at my hands. Somewhere between the first insult and the last apology that never came. She nodded. "You've been living in survival mode. But the good news is, survival means you're already stronger than he ever wanted you to be." I sat there quietly for a moment, then said, "I'm just tired of being broken." Elaine smiled softly. "You're not broken. You're rebuilding. There's a difference." End of. By the end of the session, something in me had shifted. I walked out lighter, like someone had taken a weight off my chest I didn't know I was carrying. When I got back to Mom's, Ava ran up to hug me, yelling, "Mommy!" and nearly knocking me off balance. Her arms wrapped around my waist, and I thought, this is what worth feels like. Not money. Not approval. Just love. That night, I sat at the same kitchen table where I'd cried days earlier. I opened my notebook and crossed out the first line. Find proof. I replaced it with 3 new words. Build a life. When I woke up that morning, there was a strange calm inside me. Not the numb kind that follows heartbreak, but the steady kind that comes when you finally stop running from it. The house smelled like coffee and toast, and for once, the sound of Ava laughing didn't carry the usual weight of pretending. After my appointment with Dr. Elaine, something had changed. She didn't tell me anything magical. She didn't fix me. She just helped me see that I wasn't crazy, that years of being criticized, dismissed, and ignored had trained my brain to believe I was always the problem. That morning, I found myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror. I'd avoided mirrors for a long time. Evan's voice had lived in my head too long. You've let yourself go. You look tired. Maybe eat less bread. But now, as I looked at my reflection, I didn't see what he used to describe. I saw a woman who'd carried too much and was still standing. I touched my stomach, my hips, the faint lines on my face, and for once, didn't flinch. Maybe this body wasn't perfect, but it had survived more than he ever could. Downstairs, my mom was flipping through a magazine. You're glowing, she said without looking up. I'm just wearing mascara, I said. She laughed. No, that's not it. You look Lighter? End quote. I smiled. Maybe I am. That day, I took Ava into town. We got lunch at a small diner, the kind with old booths and laminated menus. The waitress called everyone hone and refilled coffee before you asked. Ava was chattering about her science project, and I caught myself actually listening, not just nodding through my own thoughts. Halfway through our meal, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Evan. We need to talk. This silence is childish. N. I stared at it for a full minute, then turned the phone face down. Ava looked up. Who was that? No one important, I said. And it was true. When we got home, I went for a walk. The air was cool, the sky wide and blue. I thought about everything Elaine said, the way she'd explained emotional abuse. Not as loud explosions, but quiet corrosion. It's not always yelling, she'd said. Sometimes it's death by 1,000 small comments. That hit me harder than I'd admitted. Because that was exactly what Evan had done. Not outright cruelty, just little cuts that bled me dry over time. Walking down that quiet street, I decided I was done letting his voice echo in my head rent-free. I started small. I signed up for a local fitness class not to lose weight, but to feel like I owned my body again. The first day was rough. My legs ached, my lungs burned, but afterward, I felt incredible. No one was watching, no one was judging, and no one was calling me names. It was just me, moving for me. Then I went to the salon for the first time in years. I chopped my hair shorter, just enough to feel new. When the stylist spun me toward the mirror, I barely recognized myself, but I liked her. Mom noticed right away. That's a power haircut if I've ever seen one, she said. I laughed. Guess it's time I looked like the woman I'm becoming. Each day, I tried to reclaim something Evan had chipped away: my time, my confidence, my peace. I started cooking meals I liked instead of the ones he used to demand. I danced in the kitchen with Ava, badly but with enthusiasm. We laughed until she said her stomach hurt. And maybe the biggest change, I stopped apologizing. For everything. For taking up space. For wanting more. For existing. A few weeks later, Naomi called. I've got news, she said. The Whitman family has acknowledged the filing. They're requesting a meeting. I sat there holding the phone, waiting for fear to show up. It didn't. When? I asked. Tomorrow, she said. I'll be there with you. And Danielle, this is a big step. You ready? I looked out the window at Ava chasing the neighbor's dog across the yard, her laughter echoing. Yeah, I said. I'm ready. That night, I sat with my mom on the porch again. The crickets were loud, and the air smelled like cut grass. She asked what I was thinking. I used to think revenge meant hurting someone back, I said. Now I think it just means living better than they ever imagined. She smiled, proud. That's my girl. When I went inside, I tucked Ava into bed and lingered for a moment, brushing her hair off her forehead. She stirred and whispered, Are we staying here forever? I hesitated, then kissed her cheek. We'll always have somewhere safe, I said. She smiled in her sleep. Downstairs, I picked up my notebook, the one that had started as a list of survival tasks, and flipped to a new page. At the top, I wrote, Things I'm grateful for. I filled the first line easily. Ava. Then the second, Mom. Then paused before writing the third, me. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like a lie. I closed the notebook and leaned back in the chair, breathing in the night air drifting through the open window. Somewhere out there, Evan probably thought I was still broken, still hiding. He was wrong. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was rebuilding, and I was just getting started. The next morning started with a phone call that would have made the old me crumble. Evan's name flashed across the screen, bold as ever. I stared at it for a few seconds before answering, mostly out of curiosity. Danielle, he said in that clipped tone he used whenever he wanted to sound in control. We need to talk. I leaned back in my chair. About what? About us, he said. You've been acting immature. Not answering my calls, taking Ava without discussing it. I cut him off. She's my daughter, Evan. You don't get to lecture me about responsibility while you're sleeping with your assistant. Silence. For a moment, I could practically hear him blinking. Then came the arrogance. "So, you've been listening to gossip again. That's beneath you, Danielle." I laughed softly. "Trust me, the truth doesn't need gossip. I heard enough straight from your own mouth." He sighed, switching tactics. "Look, we've both said things we regret. Maybe we can fix this. I can help you get counseling, get healthier." That word healthier snapped something inside me. I could almost see him smirking while saying it, pretending to care, disguising control as concern. "Evan," I said, steady and calm, "this isn't a discussion. I'm filing for divorce." He actually laughed. "You? You don't even have the money to hire a lawyer." "I do now," I said, and before he could respond, I hung up. It was the first time in 12 years I'd ended the conversation first. For the next few days, I waited for the fallout, but it didn't come right away. Instead, I focused on what I could control. Naomi had arranged everything: the financial freeze, the legal paperwork, and the custody preparation. Every time an email came through from her office, I felt stronger. Then, Friday morning, Evan showed up, unannounced. He'd driven all the way from Dallas, probably expecting me to fall apart when he appeared on the porch. He didn't even knock politely. He just banged on the door like the house still belonged to him. When I opened it, his face was twisted in irritation. "So this is how it's gonna be? You just vanish with my kid?" "Your kid?" I repeated, crossing my arms. "Funny how you remember she exists when you're not busy with Sierra." He flinched. "Don't bring her into this. She's already in it, Evan. You made sure of that." He tried to push past me, but I blocked the doorway. "You need to leave," I said. "You think some lawyer's gonna save you?" He sneered. "You can't just walk away from me, Danielle." That sentence, "You can't just walk away." I'd heard it before so many times, in so many forms. It was his favorite illusion. Control. I straightened my shoulders. "Watch me." He stared at me for a long moment, waiting for the old me to show up, the one who apologized, cried, begged. But that woman was gone. "I'm not playing your games anymore," I said. "Naomi Cole is handling everything. Any contact goes through her from now on." He blinked. "Naomi Cole? As in that Naomi Cole? She's one of the top family lawyers in Texas." "Exactly." For once, he had no comeback. He turned, muttered something under his breath, and walked to his car. Tires screeched as he sped off, leaving dust in his wake. Mom came out a moment later, holding Ava by the hand. "He's gone?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, exhaling. And this time, I didn't let him take a piece of me with him. That afternoon, Naomi called to confirm that the restraining order paperwork was ready to file. "You did the right thing," she said. "It's not about revenge, it's about peace." Peace. I liked that word better than revenge. Revenge was sharp, but peace was steady. The next few weeks were a blur of signatures, affidavits, and court filings. Naomi's team worked like clockwork. Meanwhile, Evan's predictable tantrum hit full speed. He froze the joint accounts, emailed me accusations of stealing his child, and even tried to show up at Ava's school. Naomi shut it all down. Every move he made only strengthened our case. When we finally served him the divorce papers, Naomi personally delivered them to his office. I wasn't there, but she told me later how it went. "He turned pale," she said, grinning. "You'd have thought I handed him a live grenade." I smiled. "Wish I'd seen it." "Don't worry," she said. "There'll be plenty of chances to watch him squirm." But I wasn't doing this for spectacle. I was doing it for closure. Ava and I started building routines that were ours alone. Saturday pancakes, movie nights, walks at sunset. She stopped asking when Daddy was coming home. One night she said, "Mom, you laugh more now." That hit me harder than anything Evan had ever said. I looked at her and smiled. "Yeah, baby. I think I finally remembered how." Then one morning, I got a call from Naomi. Her voice had that mix of excitement and restraint I'd learned to recognize. "Danielle," she said. "The Whitman family responded. They want to meet. Privately." I froze mid-step. "You mean the Whitmans?" "Yes," she said. "The matriarch herself, Eleanor Whitman. She's agreed to sit down with us tomorrow in Houston. This could be huge." I felt the weight of it, the years of not knowing, the buried history, the proof of who I was. But I didn't feel afraid. Just ready. After hanging up, I looked out the kitchen window where Ava was chasing butterflies across the yard. My mom was hanging laundry, humming an old gospel tune. I thought of the woman I used to be, small, unsure, living for scraps of affection. Then I thought of the woman who'd faced down her cheating husband, found her voice, and was about to face a billionaire family without flinching. I didn't need anyone's permission to exist anymore. I stood taller, poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, and said quietly to no one in particular, "Let's see what happens next." The following morning felt like standing at the edge of something I couldn't quite name. The sky was still dark when I left Mom's house, a travel mug of coffee in one hand, and the old folder of documents in the other. Ava was still asleep, curled up beside Grandma, and for once, I didn't feel guilty leaving her. I was doing this for both of us. Naomi met me in the hotel lobby downtown, dressed like she'd stepped straight out of a courtroom drama, navy suit, calm authority, everything in its place. "You ready?" she asked, handing me a small folder. "As I'll ever be," I said, gripping it tighter than necessary. "Good. Because once we walk into that room, there's no pretending to be small." The drive to the Whitman estate took about 30 minutes, long enough for my nerves to start scratching under my skin. Houston's skyline faded into the distance, replaced by winding oak-lined roads and old money. When the black iron gates finally came into view, my stomach tightened. They were the kind of gates that didn't just keep people out, they reminded you didn't belong. The guard waved us through after a quick call, and suddenly we were driving up a long cobblestone path toward a mansion that looked like it belonged in a history book. Columns, marble steps, manicured gardens that probably had their own gardener per flower. Naomi parked the car and turned to me. "Remember, speak your truth, stay calm, and let me handle the legal talk. You don't owe anyone an apology for existing." I nodded, exhaling slowly. Inside, the place smelled like money and old perfume. A tall man in a tailored suit led us into a sitting room that could have doubled as an art museum. Every piece of furniture looked too expensive to sit on. Then she entered. Eleanor Whitman. She was older than I expected, maybe late 60s, but she carried herself like she'd been leading boardrooms her whole life. Silver hair perfectly styled, pearls at her throat, and eyes so sharp they could cut glass. "Miss Cole," she greeted Naomi first, then turned to me. "And you must be Danielle." Her voice wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. It was measured, controlled. "Yes, ma'am," I said. My voice didn't shake, which felt like a small miracle. "Please," she said, gesturing toward the sofa. "Let's talk." Saturday. A few minutes passed as Naomi laid out the documents, birth certificates, letters, DNA results, everything Ruth and my mother had protected for decades. Eleanor's hands didn't tremble as she turned each page, but her expression shifted, almost imperceptibly, from curiosity to disbelief, to something deeper, regret, maybe. When she reached the photo of my mother and her son Michael, she paused. "I remember this dress," she murmured. "It was one of mine. She was so young." Her voice cracked, just barely, before she composed herself again. Naomi cleared her throat softly. "As you can see, Mrs. Whitman, the evidence is clear. Danielle is your late son's biological daughter. The paperwork aligns perfectly with the trust documents from Michael's will." Eleanor set the photo down carefully. "You understand," she said, looking at me. "This changes a great deal." "I understand," I said. "But I didn't come here to change anything that doesn't want to change. I just want the truth acknowledged." That seemed to surprise her. "You're not here for money?" I shook my head. "No. I spent my whole adult life being told I wasn't enough by people who thought money made them better. I'm not here to beg for anything. I'm just here to be seen for who I am." The silence that followed was long but not uncomfortable. For the first time, Eleanor's expression softened. "You sound like your mother," she said quietly. "She came to us once, before you were born." I turned her away. I thought I was protecting my family, but really, I was protecting my pride. "Hap to." Naomi watched closely, her lawyer's instincts ready, but I could tell this wasn't going to turn into a fight. This was something else. An old wound reopening. Eleanor continued. "Michael loved her deeply. When she disappeared, he was never the same. I always suspected my husband had Handled it. She glanced away, her jaw tightening. He's gone now, and I suppose this is my chance to make it right. Naomi nodded. Then perhaps we can discuss next steps. Legally, Danielle is entitled to her share of Michael's estate. Eleanor waved a hand. Of course, I'll make sure it's transferred properly, but I'd rather handle this as family, not just as business. She turned to me again. Would you and your daughter consider visiting the estate next weekend? I'd like to meet her. And you, properly. I blinked, stunned. I hadn't expected generosity, much less kindness. That would mean a lot, I said softly. When the meeting ended, Eleanor stood and extended her hand. You remind me of your father, she said. He had this way of speaking quietly but leaving an impact. I think you'll do great things with this truth, Danielle. Outside, Naomi exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for the last hour. That went better than I expected. You think she was sincere? I asked. Naomi nodded. Oh, absolutely. That woman doesn't fake guilt. Trust me, I've met enough of her kind to know the difference. As we drove back into the city, the tension finally broke, and I found myself laughing out of pure relief. Do you realize, I said, that for the first time in my life, I'm not the one asking for acceptance? Naomi grinned. You've crossed a line, Danielle. The point of no return, and trust me, it's a good thing. By the time I got home, the sun was setting. Mom was in the kitchen cooking, and Ava was sitting at the table coloring. When she looked up and saw me smiling, she said, Mom, you look happy. I leaned down and kissed the top of her head. I am, sweetheart, I really am. And for once, it wasn't something I said to convince myself, it was simply true. That night, while Ava slept, I sat on the porch again, thinking about Eleanor Whitman, about how life can twist 2 generations of pain into 1 moment of redemption. Maybe revenge didn't have to be loud or cruel. Maybe it was just becoming everything they said you couldn't be, and doing it without bitterness. When the night breeze shifted, I could almost hear my mother's voice, soft and steady. You've come a long way, baby girl. And for the first time in years, I believed it. The following week moved fast, like the world was finally catching up to everything I'd been holding back for years. Naomi handled the legal transition with the Whitman estate, while quietly preparing the divorce filings for court. I was no longer just Danielle Porter, the wife. On paper, I was now the confirmed heir to the Whitman fortune, a woman with financial independence and legal power. And Evan had no idea. Naomi's advice had been simple. Let him underestimate you. He's already doing half our work for us. She wasn't wrong. Evan had spent the last 2 weeks sending condescending emails about being reasonable, hinting that we could reconcile if I stopped being dramatic. His arrogance was so predictable, it was almost funny. Then Wednesday came. Naomi called just before noon. He's in for a surprise, she said. We're serving him the papers this afternoon at his office. I couldn't help it, I laughed out loud. You're kidding. Nope. I want him surrounded by everything he thinks defines him. His career, his reputation, his ego. Consider it poetic justice. That afternoon, I drove downtown, parked a few blocks from his firm, and sat in the car for a moment, my hands resting on the steering wheel. I didn't go inside, I didn't need to. Just being close enough to know it was happening was enough. Naomi texted me 15 minutes later. Served. You should have seen his face. I smiled to myself and started the car. The power in that moment wasn't about revenge, it was about freedom. The version of me who used to cry in the bathroom after every fight would have never believed this one existed. That night, Evan called, of course he did. His voice was controlled, but the panic was there, hiding beneath his arrogance. Danielle, he started. What the hell is this? Divorce papers? Are you out of your mind? I stayed calm. It's exactly what it looks like. You can't be serious. You think you can just walk away? You have nothing without me. I laughed quietly. That's where you're wrong. You just haven't read the news yet. What are you talking about? You'll find out, I said, and hung up. The next day, Naomi's assistant sent me the press release draft confirming the inheritance transfer. The Whitman family's legal statement was brief but powerful. We are pleased to acknowledge Miss Danielle Porter as the daughter of our late Michael Whitman. She is a valued member of the Whitman family, and will assume her rightful position within the estate and charitable foundation. By that afternoon, it was everywhere: local business columns, legal blogs, even a few gossip sites. And right on cue, Evan called again. This time his tone was completely different. "Danielle, hey, I saw the news. Why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you what?" I asked. That you're a Whitman. This is huge. I mean, we've been married 12 years. We have a daughter." "Exactly," I cut in. 12 years. And you spent most of them tearing me down. Now suddenly you remember you're my husband?" He hesitated. "I just think we owe it to Ava to talk. Maybe we could start over." It was almost impressive how fast he could shapeshift from arrogance to fake sincerity. "Evan," I said calmly, "you cheated, lied, and called me worthless. Now you're only realizing my worth because someone else validated it. That's not love. That's convenience." He started to protest, but I ended the call before he could finish. Later that evening, Naomi called. "So, he's begging?" "Oh, full performance," I said. "If he brings flowers, I'll send them back with a note that says wrong address." Naomi laughed. "I like this version of you, Danielle." "Me too," I said quietly. The next few days unfolded like the universe had decided to send me a front row seat to Evan's unraveling. Word around town was that his partners weren't thrilled about the scandal. The recordings of his affair, legally obtained thanks to Texas's one-party consent law, had been quietly filed with the divorce motion. Naomi didn't have to threaten him publicly. Just the knowledge that she could was enough to make him behave. At one point she said, "He's already panicking. His reputation's built on being the clean-cut family man. That image won't survive the truth." I should have felt vindicated. Maybe part of me did. But mostly, I just felt done. One evening, I took Ava to the park near our new apartment. She ran ahead, chasing a group of kids around the playground, her laughter floating through the air. Sitting on the bench, I thought about how long I'd lived trying to be someone's good wife, someone's good mother, someone's good everything. Now, I was just me, and that was enough. When Ava ran back, breathless and smiling, she said, "Mom, can I push you on the swing?" I laughed. "You think I'm small enough for that?" "Yeah," she said seriously. "You're strong but not heavy like before." It took me a second to realize she wasn't talking about my weight. She meant something deeper. I smiled. "Okay, baby girl, let's swing." And Andy. That night, while tucking her into bed, she said, "Mom, are we going to be happy now?" I brushed her hair back. "We already are." After she fell asleep, I sat in the quiet living room with a cup of tea, scrolling through my emails. One from Eleanor stood out. "Danielle, I'd like you and Ava to attend next month's Whitman Foundation Gala. It's time the city met you properly. Bring your mother too. She deserves this as much as you do. Warmly, Eleanor." "Oh?" I stared at the message, smiling to myself. For years, I'd walked into rooms feeling invisible. Now, I was being invited to one where everyone would have to see me. And not as Evan's wife, not as someone's afterthought, but as Danielle Porter, daughter, mother, survivor, and the woman who finally remembered her worth. The kettle whistled softly in the background. I stood, poured another cup, and let the warmth fill the silence. No anger, no bitterness, just peace. Revenge didn't always look like fire and fury. Sometimes it looked like calm. Sometimes it looked like freedom. The morning of the Whitman Foundation Gala arrived with the kind of calm that usually comes after a long storm. My new emerald dress hung by the door, and Ava was twirling in her room, humming some pop song while trying not to spill juice on her white shoes. I'd been invited to more events in the last month than I had in my entire life, but this one was different. This was the night my name would stop being a whisper. Eleanor's driver picked us up just before 6. The car glided through the city like it belonged there. Ava pressed her face to the window, pointing at the skyscrapers. "Mom, are we famous now?" I smiled. "No, baby, we're just being seen." The Whitman estate was lit like something out of a movie. White tents, string lights over the gardens, and photographers already flashing cameras as cars pulled in. Naomi was waiting near the entrance, looking effortlessly powerful in black satin. "You ready for this?" she asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," I said, straightening my shoulders. "Good, because tonight You're not just Danielle Porter, you're Danielle Whitman Porter, and every person in this room will know it." Inside, the air buzzed with polite laughter, classical music, and the sound of money moving in every direction. People turned as Eleanor entered, regal in her silver gown. When she reached the stage, she took the microphone with the ease of someone used to being obeyed. "Tonight," she began, "we celebrate not just our foundation's success but the strength of family. It's my honor to introduce someone who embodies that strength, my granddaughter, Danielle." A small wave of murmurs moved through the crowd as I walked to the stage. Flashbulbs popped. For a heartbeat, I thought I might trip or forget how to speak. But then I saw Ava beaming from her chair, and everything else disappeared. "Thank you," I said into the mic. I grew up thinking my story was one of struggle. But sometimes, struggle is just the first act of becoming who you're supposed to be. There was polite applause at first, but then something deeper, people actually listening. I didn't talk about money or bloodlines. I talked about self-worth, about raising a daughter who would never doubt her value, about finding freedom after years of being small. When I finished, the applause felt genuine. From across the room, I spotted him, Evan. He was standing near the bar, looking like a ghost wearing a borrowed suit. I'd known he'd show up eventually, men like him always do, trying to crash the party when they realize they're not invited anymore. He caught my eye, smirked faintly, and raised his glass. It wasn't confidence. It was desperation, dressed up as charm. Naomi noticed him too. "You want me to have security escort him out?" she murmured. I shook my head. "No, let him watch." Eleanor approached after my speech, linking her arm through mine. "You did beautifully, dear. Your mother would be proud." "Thank you," I said. Evan was still hovering, waiting for a chance to corner me. Eventually, he got it during the intermission, near the hallway lined with framed photographs of the Whitman family legacy. "Danielle," he started, his voice softer now, practiced. "Can we talk?" I crossed my arms. "I think we've said everything that needed saying." He looked around, lowering his voice. "Look, I know I screwed up. I didn't appreciate what I had. But maybe we could—" "Stop," I said, holding up a hand. "This isn't a redemption scene. You don't get to rewrite what happened." His jaw clenched. "You really think all this makes you better than me? You wouldn't have any of it without my support." I actually laughed. "Evan, the only thing I got from you was trauma and high blood pressure. Everything else I earned." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to that same threatening tone he used to use when he wanted to make me feel small. "Don't forget, I still know things about you, things you might not want public." I met his eyes and smiled. "Go ahead. I've already lived through worse." That threw him off balance. His face tightened, and he walked away, muttering something about how I'd regret this. But as I watched him leave through the side door, all I felt was relief. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and polite handshakes. By the time Ava fell asleep on Eleanor's lap, I realized how peaceful the night felt. Not perfect, not fairy tale, just peaceful. Naomi came over with a glass of champagne. "You know," she said, "I've seen a lot of revenge stories. Usually, the big win is watching the other person fall apart. But you? You didn't need him to fall. You just needed to rise." I smiled. "That's the best revenge, isn't it?" She nodded. "Always." On the drive home, the city lights blurred into gold streaks across the car window. Ava slept against my shoulder, breathing softly. I thought about how far we'd come from that kitchen where I'd stood shaking, listening to Evan's cruel words, to this moment where his opinion didn't mean a thing. When we got home, I tucked Ava into bed and sat by the window for a long time, watching the moonlight spill across the floor. My phone buzzed a text from Naomi. "Divorce finalized, official as of 9 p.m. I stared at the message, feeling no urge to cry or celebrate. Just a steady, quiet certainty that my life was finally mine again. Down the hall, Ava stirred and murmured in her sleep. "Mom, you happy?" I whispered back, even though she couldn't hear me. "Yeah, baby. I am." On. Outside, the world kept moving, cars, crickets, the soft hum of city life. But for once, I wasn't trying to catch up to it. I was already exactly where I needed to be. The morning after the gala, I woke up before sunrise. The house was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and Ava's soft breathing from her room. I stood by the kitchen window with my coffee, watching the first streaks of light crawl across the sky. For the first time in years, my life wasn't defined by what I'd lost, but by what I could build. The news about the gala had already spread. Photos of Eleanor and me made the society pages, with headlines like, "The hidden Whitman heir steps into the spotlight." Some reporters tried to dig for scandal, but Eleanor shut that down fast. She told them, "There's no scandal in a woman reclaiming her name." That line hit me deeply. Reclaiming my name felt like exactly what I'd done. Later that week, Eleanor invited me to her downtown office, the headquarters of the Whitman Foundation. The building was sleek and modern, all glass and light, the kind of place that used to intimidate me. But not anymore. She was waiting in her office with 2 board members, and that calm, commanding smile she carried like armor. "Danielle," she said, "we'd like to offer you the director position for a new program, the Family Renewal Initiative. It's meant to help single mothers rebuild their lives." He blinked, stunned. "You're serious?" Eleanor nodded. "I am. You understand what it means to start over with nothing. You'll bring compassion and realism to this work. We can handle the money and logistics. You'll handle the vision." It felt like everything in me clicked into place. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I'd love to." When I left her office, I called Naomi first. She whooped loud enough to make me laugh. "You realize this is full circle, right? You went from being controlled by a man to controlling your own narrative. That's power, Danielle." And it was. Real, grounded power. Within a month, we launched the Family Renewal Initiative under the Whitman Foundation's umbrella. The first program was a community center in downtown Houston, part legal aid, part job training, part daycare. I spent my days meeting women whose stories mirrored mine. The exhaustion, the fear, the slow climb back toward self-worth. One afternoon, a young woman named Kyra came in, holding a toddler on her hip. She'd been kicked out by her boyfriend after losing her job. "He said I'm useless now," she whispered, eyes red from crying. I looked her straight in the eye. "You're not useless. You're exhausted. There's a difference." "Ah." She broke down crying, and I just held her hand until she stopped shaking. In that moment, I realized something powerful. I wasn't just healing my own past. I was helping others heal theirs. Ava loved the new center. On weekends, she'd come with me and play with the kids while I met clients. One Saturday, she handed me a crayon drawing she'd made, 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sundae. "That's us," she said proudly. "Me, you, and Grandma Eleanor." His note. I framed it the next day. Meanwhile, Evan was fading from our lives like background noise. The divorce settlement had gone through quietly. He'd tried to contest custody, but the court didn't take long to see through his performance. Supervised visits, limited contact, and a judge who didn't appreciate men who used money as leverage. Naomi handled every detail like a surgeon. One afternoon, she called to update me. "He's trying to appeal the custody terms," she said. I rolled my eyes. "Let him. I'm not scared of him anymore." "That's my girl," she said. "You know, this is the part most people miss. Revenge isn't about winning in court. It's about no longer caring if you do." She was right. Weeks later, Eleanor visited the center for the first time. She walked through the bright new lobby, stopping to talk to staff and mothers alike. Watching her, I realized how much she'd changed too. The guilt she carried had softened into purpose. At the end of the tour, she turned to me. "You've done something remarkable here, Danielle. Your mother would have loved this." I smiled. "I think she's here, in every corner." That evening, as we locked up, I found a handwritten note taped to the office door. It said, "Thank you for giving me a second chance." No signature, no clue who left it, but I didn't need one. That single sentence meant more than all the applause from the gala combined. At home, Ava and I cooked dinner together, her stirring pasta while I chopped vegetables. She told me about her day at school and how she'd volunteered to help a classmate who was getting bullied. "I told her she shouldn't listen to mean people," Ava said proudly. "That's what you always say." I smiled. "And you were absolutely right." Later that night, after tucking her in, I sat outside with a glass of wine, thinking about how far we'd come. The woman who once cried in silence because her husband mocked her weight was now running a foundation that lifted other women up. The woman who thought she had no future was now designing one for hundreds of families. And strangely, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt peaceful. Eleanor called just before I went to bed. "I've been thinking," she said. "You should be co-chair for next year's gala. It's time you lead the next phase of this foundation." "Are you sure?" I asked. "You've built this legacy. And you've given it meaning again," she said simply. When we hung up, I stood in front of the mirror, no fancy dress, no makeup, just me. The reflection that stared back wasn't flawless. But she was whole. For years, I thought healing would feel like forgetting. It doesn't. It feels like remembering exactly who you were before the world tried to make you smaller, and loving that person back to life. The next morning, I woke to Ava climbing onto my bed. "Mom, can we go to the center today?" I smiled, pulling her close. "Of course we can." Because that was the beauty of it all. Every day was a second chance for me, for her, and for everyone still learning to believe they deserved one. By the time fall rolled around, life had settled into something steady, something I hadn't known in years. The air carried that faint crispness that always made me think of new beginnings. The Family Renewal Center was running smoothly. Naomi had become both my lawyer and one of my closest friends, and Ava had started 4th grade, already announcing that she wanted to be a lawyer like Aunt Naomi. Some mornings, I'd catch myself smiling at the smallest things like watching Ava tie her sneakers or hearing her hum off key while brushing her teeth. That simple, ordinary peace had once felt impossible. Now, it felt earned. One Thursday afternoon, I was finishing up a meeting at the center when my assistant came in, looking hesitant. "There's someone here to see you," she said quietly. "He says his name is Evan Porter." For a moment, I froze not out of fear, but disbelief. I hadn't seen him since the divorce hearing, almost a year ago. I stood slowly. "You can send him in." When he walked into my office, he looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but in presence. The sharp suit, the perfect haircut, it all seemed like armor that didn't fit anymore. "Danielle," he said, his voice low. "You look good." "Thanks," I said, folding my arms. "What do you need, Evan?" He hesitated, eyes darting around the room. "I didn't come to fight. I just wanted to talk." "I'm listening." He took a deep breath. "I lost my job a few months ago. Word got around about the affair, and then the firm downsized. Sierra left too." He gave a bitter laugh. "Apparently, loyalty isn't her strong suit." I raised an eyebrow. "Neither was yours." He nodded slightly. "Fair enough." For a moment, he seemed unsure of himself. Then he said, "I wanted to apologize. I know it's late. I was arrogant, cruel, and stupid. You didn't deserve any of it." I studied him carefully, waiting for the punchline, the manipulation. But it didn't come. He looked genuinely defeated. "Why now?" I asked. "Because I saw the article about your center," he said. "About what you're doing. You turned all that pain into something good. I didn't think you had that in you. I guess I just wanted to tell you. I was wrong." I let out a slow breath. "You were wrong about a lot of things." He nodded. "Yeah." Then, after a long pause, "Can I see Ava sometime? Just see her?" "She's not ready," I said gently. "She's happy, and I won't risk confusing her again. But maybe one day, when she's older." He nodded, staring at the floor. "That's fair." And there was an awkward silence before he turned to leave. As he reached the door, he stopped. "You really did become everything I said you couldn't." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just said, "I always was. You just never looked close enough." He left quietly, closing the door behind him. I sat back in my chair for a long moment, letting the air settle. There wasn't satisfaction in that encounter, just closure. Clean and complete. Later that evening, I told Naomi about it over dinner. She leaned back in her chair, swirling her wine. "Classic," she said. "They always come crawling back when they see you thriving." I didn't feel angry, I admitted. I just felt done. She grinned. "That's the real revenge, Danny. Not breaking his heart, just not caring anymore." That night, After Ava went to bed, I stood on the porch, watching the autumn leaves spin across the lawn. Somewhere behind me, the phone buzzed a message from Eleanor. Dinner Sunday at the house. Bring Ava. We're family. Family. The word felt warm now, not something I had to chase or earn, something real. Sunday came, and Eleanor's house was glowing with soft light and laughter. Her husband's old study had been turned into a library for Ava filled with children's books and art supplies. Every Whitman deserves a place to dream, Eleanor said with a wink. We ate together, Eleanor, my mother, Ava, and me. 3 generations of women who'd carried more than their share of pain and found their way through it. After dinner, Eleanor took my hand. You know, she said, I used to think legacy was about money or reputation, but watching you, I realize it's about resilience. You've built something I never could. I squeezed her hand. You gave me the chance. When we got home that night, Ava ran ahead, kicking through piles of leaves. Mom, she called out, we should invite Grandma Eleanor for Thanksgiving. I laughed. You might be onto something. She turned, grinning. Can we make her your pumpkin pie? Absolutely. As she darted inside, I lingered for a moment on the driveway, looking up at the stars. I thought about every version of myself. I'd been the girl who believed in fairy tales, the woman who lost herself in someone else's shadow, and the mother who finally chose peace over pain. They were all still part of me, but the difference now was simple. I wasn't ashamed of any of them. Later, while tucking Ava into bed, she asked softly, Mom, are you glad everything happened? Even the bad stuff? I paused, brushing her hair from her face. You know what? I think I am. Because it made us who we are now. She smiled sleepily. You're the best mom in the world. I kissed her forehead. No, sweetheart. I'm just a mom who finally learned her worth. Had great. When I turned off the light and stepped into the hallway, the house felt still and safe. Not perfect, just peaceful. And maybe that's what happiness really is. Not fireworks, not revenge, but the quiet certainty that you survived and built something beautiful out of it. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, scattering the last of the autumn leaves. I closed my eyes, breathed it in, and smiled, ready for whatever came next. Not because I needed to prove anything anymore, but because I finally believed I could handle it all. It was one of those quiet Texas mornings when the air felt cool enough to remind you that change had settled in for good. I woke up before Ava, brewed coffee, and stood by the window watching the light slide across the kitchen floor. Everything around me, the sound of the kettle, the framed drawings on the fridge, even the hum of the dishwasher felt like the life I'd been chasing without realizing it. Simple, peaceful, mine. Eleanor had been right. Legacy wasn't money or name recognition. It was what you built with your second chance. The Family Renewal Center had grown faster than any of us expected. We'd opened 2 new branches, one in Dallas and another in Austin, both filled with women determined to start over the way I once did. That morning, I was preparing for a donor breakfast when Naomi called. Her voice, as usual, carried that mix of humor and sharpness that always grounded me. You're on the front page again, she said. Oh God, what did I do now? Relax, superstar. It's an article about the center. Headline says, From Betrayed Wife to Beacon of Hope. Oh, 6? I laughed, shaking my head. That sounds dramatic. Dramatic sells, she said. And let's be honest, it's not wrong. Before we hung up, she added softly, You've come a long way, Danielle. Don't forget to enjoy it. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that. When I arrived at the event, the ballroom buzzed with quiet conversation and clinking coffee cups. Faces turned when I walked in, not out of curiosity this time, but respect. Eleanor was already there, poised as ever, introducing me to guests as my granddaughter, the woman who turned pain into purpose. I shook hands, smiled for photos, gave the kind of speech I used to practice in the mirror but never thought I'd deliver. I talked about rebuilding, not revenge, not tragedy, but transformation, about how one woman's story could become another's survival guide. When the applause came, it wasn't loud, it was warm, real. Afterward, a woman in her 50s approached me, tears in her eyes. I left my husband last month, she said. He made me believe I was worthless. Then I read your story. It gave me courage. I hugged her. You already had the courage. You just needed a reminder. That moment stayed with me all day. That evening, back home, Mom was on the porch waiting with Ava. They'd been baking, judging by the flour streaks on Ava's face and the smell of cinnamon floating through the air. "We saved you a slice," Mom said, holding out a plate. I sat beside them, the three of us watching the sunset stretch across the sky. Ava leaned against me, half asleep, mumbling, "Mom, you're famous." I smiled. "No, sweetheart. I'm just happy." Mom chuckled. "Sometimes that's the rarest kind of fame." For a long while, none of us spoke. The sun dipped lower, the air turning gold. Inside the house, my phone buzzed, probably more messages, invitations, articles, but I didn't move. I didn't need to. I thought about the path that brought me here. The nights crying alone in the kitchen while Evan called me names. The morning I finally packed my bags. The envelope that changed everything. The first therapy session. The meeting with Eleanor. The moment I decided to stop surviving and start living. Each piece had hurt, but each had built the woman sitting here now. Later, after Ava went to bed, I wandered into my study. On the bookshelf sat a small wooden box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were the old letters from my father, the ones that had once felt like lifelines. I unfolded the last one again, the one that said, "May you never doubt your worth, even when others try to erase it." For so long, I'd thought those words were a wish. Now I knew they were a challenge. I placed the letter back in the box and closed it carefully, as if sealing a chapter not to forget it, but to honor it. The next morning, I met Eleanor for coffee. She was wearing her signature pearls, the same kind she'd worn the day we met. "I read your interview," she said, smiling. "You sound like a leader." I laughed. "I sound like someone trying to keep up with her calendar." She chuckled. "Danielle, leadership doesn't always mean being the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes it's being the calmest." That afternoon, we toured the newest center together. I watched her greet every woman by name. Her once rigid posture softened into something maternal. She stopped beside a mural on the main hallway wall painted by the women we'd helped. It read, "We are not broken, we are becoming." Eleanor touched the words gently. "That's what you've done," she said. "You've helped people become." Driving home later, I realized something. For years, I'd thought my story was about revenge, about proving my ex-husband wrong, making him see what he lost. But it never really was. My real victory wasn't that Evan saw me succeed. It was that I stopped needing him to see anything at all. That night, I tucked Ava into bed, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "You're my greatest miracle." She smiled sleepily. "And you're mine." Downstairs, I poured a small glass of wine and stood by the open window. The night was quiet, the air cool and still. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle blew, long and low, fading into silence. I thought about all the women who might still be sitting at their kitchen tables right now, feeling small and unseen, thinking their stories were over. If I could tell them one thing, it would be this. You're not broken. You're just waiting for your next chapter to begin. I looked around my home, warm light spilling from every room, laughter echoing faintly from Ava's sleep, and felt an overwhelming sense of peace. This wasn't the life I'd imagined. It was better. Because I didn't just survive what broke me. I built something beautiful from it. And in the end, that was the truest revenge of all. If you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or silenced, remember your story isn't over. You can rise from the wreckage and create something stronger than before. Because, and if stories like this speak to you, family are. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply living well.